live.
Oh, we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's first ever Crush Club chat. What? We're number one. We'll give you guys a few more minutes to log on. I know this is the first time. Tonight's conversation will be about Harvest 2017 and then the fall releases that were in your case. So we have a lot to go through tonight. Just 6 wines. And he's got some crazy notes about something. I'm not sure.
Harvest.
So we have Andrew Windsor, our winemaker, and then Andrew Moon, our viticulturalist vineyard manager. So we have Andrew squared tonight. So don't forget to ask your questions. And then I have some great other promo stuff to tell you about at the end.
Ooh.
Ta-da!
Exciting stuff.
Sounds awesome. Thanks, Shalana. Well, Mr. Moon, did you want to start off by telling us some facts about the harvest, or do we need to wait, Shalana, until everyone is
Let's just go for
with
it.
us?
We can go for it.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So,
Before we do that, we should start with some Chardonnay.
Okay. I already pre-poured some.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Well done.
Very
So
nice.
if you're drinking some wine with us this evening, please start with the Chardonnay from 2016 while we go through 2017 harvest data.
Yes. Obviously, welcome everyone. Andrew, viticulturist at Tin Horn Creek. Like usual, it was a totally different season than you ever have. That's my job. So 217, what they call is average. So if you go back,
Whatever that means.
go back in
Canada.
time, strange season, but for us guys out in the vineyard, we started off pretty slow. It was actually below average in temperature for the year, and it was quite wet. So that was quite different here for the Okanagan. So got the vines, they were pretty slow, but then there was a lot of water in the ground. So then we moved into May and June, and that was quite average temperatures. But then July, August, and September were quite warm, okay, on average. And then October, at the end of the season, was below average. So we had a mixed bag. So it provided us with it's quite a challenging season growing grapes, I'd say.
In the 4 vintages that I've worked here at Tin Horn, 5 vintages in the Okanagan, probably from a grape growing perspective, one of the more challenging vintages, but also one of the most rewarding as well. I think the wines from 17 so far look amazing.
Absolutely. We the other thing was that we had all this rain. Well, we had only about 60 mil for the total year, and 50 something mil of it was in the first 2 months of the growing season. So we had all this rain at the start of the year. Then it was totally dry for the whole growing season. And then we, of course, when we're trying to harvest, there was a little bit of rain around. So that's how it usually goes. But interesting season. But what happened was the biggest thing in viticulture was we got a lot of very small berries from the dry growing season, so very super concentrated, and that showed up really well up in the reds. So that was a big thing that happened this season. So,
from a nerd's perspective, you would say flowering was cold and windy, which led to small berries.
Small berries, lower
small
set.
Sets. Yeah.
So probably about
set meaning for our guests.
Set being when the flowers on the grapevines actually set berries. Okay, so that happened when was it probably around late June. And then that weather around then wasn't the best for flowering for grapes. And what it does is that just reduced the number of berries on a bunch. So what I did probably overall, it reduced our yields by probably about 30%, but super concentrated the grapes. So this season we're going to have some pretty wicked wines come out of that. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Shalane, did you have some questions coming through?
No, I have some comments, though.
Comments.
I know. So we have some people drinking the Oldfield Merlot tonight already. So they skipped right past the white.
Going right to the end.
Yeah, we're just like, let's just.
It's winter in Canada, even though it's still.
Well, they're Alberta, so they've been drinking this since July. So, in all fairness.
And they're an hour ahead.
Exactly, right? So yeah, so don't forget, guys, ask any questions that you have as we go through as well. Some tasting notes on the Chard.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, if we want to rip right into the wines, we can do that. The nice thing about this tasting and this release is I believe this is the first release where all of the wines in the case I've had a part in, which I've been here for 4 vintages now. It's nice knowing that you've worked with all of the wines. I no longer have to make stuff up completely to you guys. I actually know what I'm talking about now, for real. So it is kind of nice.
I have watched that transition.
We all have.
Yeah. I started looking down and answering questions about the wine I wasn't a part of. No, but yes, it is kind of a nice feeling now. That and also working here for 4 vintages is the longest I've worked anywhere since I think I was 16. So. We're making progress. 2016 Chardonnay. Do you want to talk about the 16 vintage a little bit? Your memory for these seasons is more detailed than mine.
So 14, 15, 16 are either hot or above average in temperature-wise. So 16 was probably one of the cooler ones out of those 3 years. Chardonnay, it actually really liked that vintage. We had nice growth early in the season. Got the vines up pretty early, so canopy growth, and then we could play around with the berries kind of thing, so control their size and then get super concentrated like Chardonnay and stuff like that. So it was a really good vintage actually for Chardonnay. Excellent.
Yeah, and I think if you are familiar with the 14 and the 15 Chardonnays, the 16 you'll notice is a bit more of a return towards what I think I would say were Tinhorn styles in the 12 and 13 vintages, where they're a bit brighter. There's a fair amount more acid in these. 14 and 15 in certainly late August and early September were very hot, high 30s, which means the acidity tends to drop off quite quickly. 16, we had a really cool September, and that's really allowed this wine to retain a lot more brightness and freshness. It's still barrel fermented in French and American oak. A good chunk of it, probably 35 to 45% of it. And then all those barrel ferments, again, are natural fermentation. And we've got a hand up from Chelan.
Yeah, we have a question.
Oh!
So you've been on numerous other webinars talking about different oaks and our oak program, i.e. Hungarian, French versus American. I know that when they used to be lightly oaked our Chardonnay. So what exactly have you done to change the oak program for our Chardonnay and your reasons why?
I think the reasons why are to match the sites and the vintages. As I said, 14 and 15 were always going to be bigger Chardonnays based on the fact that the harvest temperatures were always quite hot, which gives you more texture and more weight. The sites that we grow on tend to lead towards being more fleshy styles of Chardonnay as well. And so I always found that, they just respond really well to barrel fermentation, which again, just adds a bit more texture and a bit of sweetness to the wines. 16 is a bit easier to look at now and say, well, you could back off the oak a bit more, which we did compared to a year like 15, which was very, very ripe. So it's not like you have a recipe every vintage that you're like, okay, we're going to use this oak every year for our Chardonnays. You really need to, it's like adding salt to any dish. You just need to get it right every time. And through experience, you learn how to do that. For our entry-level Chardonnay, our varietal series, I've always liked American oak in Chardonnay. I think it really, especially for a more full-bodied style, brings out the tropical flavor profile, pineapple specifically. So I've always really enjoyed using some premium American barrel producers for that. But then you get the complexity and the spice from the French oak as well. So we use both. It just depends on more or less how much new oak the wines can take, and that is very vintage dependent. I think that should answer the question.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Very well answered, Andrew.
All right.
All right. So on to the next, do you think? We've got 6 wines to get through, so we have a pretty...
I haven't tried that one in a while. It's
the
really...
Two-Bench White?
No, the Chardonnay. It's really... It needed a bit of time to open up. And it's really starting to strut itself just in time for the holidays. Two-Bench White. 2016 vintage again. This is certainly one of my favorite wines. We already went through the 2016 vintage. I guess one of the first things that Andrew Moon and I discussed when I started here in 2014 was, actually would have been after the 2014 harvest, was retraining our Sauvignon Blanc vineyard so that we can get some more Sauvignon Blanc into this blend specifically. And we don't know if we've got time to go through the nerdy side of what we did, but
I could just sum it up in a couple of words. We changed it. If you're into spur pruning, we changed it from that to a trellis system called Pendelbogen. So what it does is actually is a kind of form of cane pruning, and it allows the Sauvignon Blanc to yield more at a better quality. So that's what we did in the vineyards.
Exactly.
So that's as concise as I can put it in a couple of words.
So I have had a question go through. So Michelle says, I notice Andrew Moon is continually smelling the Chardonnay and the Two-Bench White. How much does the aroma change as it sits in the glass?
Quite a bit. As the wines warm up, they'll change their aromatic profile. So I just like smelling wines when they're opened, from when they come out cold out of a fridge to when they've been sitting on the table for a little while, and they'll actually change. The Two-Bench White is one of my favourite wines as well, because those 5 grape varietals that are in it have different characteristics, and they all change through age and temperature. So as the bottle ages itself, the grapes in there change, and also as the temperature changes in the bottle. So it's a really cool bottle to have out on a dinner table, and over time, so you can have it, 6 months later and the profile changes. That's what I find.
Yeah, super, super dynamic
cool
white
wine.
blend.
Cool wine.
That is, you drink a lot of white blends that are in the market that are sort of a bit anonymous as to what is in them. This wine, obviously, and had the opportunity to make it a few times now. But one thing that's consistent about it is you can identify almost every variety in there if you've got a solid nose for identifying Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, Viognier, Chardonnay.
I just like it.
And Muscat, Autumnal. But I guess, going back to the original point of Sauvignon Blanc, this is the first time we've had almost 50% Sauvignon Blanc in this blend. I don't think it's ever been the driving grape variety behind the blend, but I think it shows really, really well. And this wine's been out since we released it here in the summer, maybe late spring. But as Andrew mentioned, it comes out released very Sauvignon Blanc driven, whether it's 50% Sauvignon Blanc or 20% Sauvignon Blanc. As it ages and as it kind of warms up, you'll start to see the richer varieties of Viognier and the Semillon start to come through. And the thing I love most about this wine is it doesn't really matter what the blend is. The blend is 100% dictated by the vineyard's performance. So it changes every year quite substantially, but it always has the same feel, and it kind of always has the same characteristic. And I think that's just the 2 vineyard sites. They shine through more than the 5 varieties do, which is quite unique for a 5 variety white blend. Tasty wine.
Nice. So Carol is wondering, is this the Two-Bench White that's been winning all the awards?
We'll just say yes.
I believe the 2015 is the one that won all the awards before this one, and this one's now winning all the awards. So I'm not sure who's got more awards in terms of vintages.
Well, you did both the 15 and the 16, so I think overall you're coming out as winning.
Winning.
Well, the 15 was different, and we don't have time to go into it too much, but the 15 was 30% Viognier, which is the first time that blend had ever had that much Viognier in it. Plus, it was a very, very hot vintage. So it came out of the gate looking more like Viognier than any of the other ones prior to it, which a lot of people liked. It was a rich style, and everyone loves Viognier. So it's not like Chardonnay where people are like, oh, no, can't drink it. Everyone likes Viognier.
I do want to make note. I know that we're at the beginning of our first Crush Club chat, but we are online with a number of Crush Club members that have been with us since the beginning of online kitchen chat.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's only fitting that we raise a glass to Ken and Sandra and thank them for starting this.
Absolutely.
And, you know, without,
Cheers.
we wouldn't have this. So, you know, it's different. It's a different format for all of us.
Mm-hmm. So
it's all good.
I'll definitely miss Ken's food, like up at the house. Like,
yeah. Miradoro's not too bad either, but
it was okay, but I don't know. Ken makes some really good tortillas.
He does.
He
does.
Like, it's pretty.
Absolutely.
Ken wouldn't have made a short rib that's causing me to like be slightly lethargic at the moment. So he's
only slightly.
Slightly.
Oh, okay.
My right eye is closing, but could be the light.
It could be the light.
Mm-hmm. No, good point. Just gonna continue to carry on the tradition of making great wine and putting on a good show for our Crush Club members and everybody else that's out there.
Yeah.
So thank you all for tuning in. We've got a pretty good crowd tonight, from what I hear. And we hopefully will be. Do we have any info on the regularity of the show now? I know it's kind of been
still going to be every 2 months.
Every 2 months.
So the next one will actually be in January with you, Andrew Windsor.
Lovely.
And with me. So
Okay.
I'm getting ready for my close-up. You know, I'm
you might need to hit
fancy dress.
The tanning salon because I'm going to be in Australia for a few weeks prior to the show.
Crap.
So I won't look like a ghost as I do currently here in a Canadian late November.
It's okay. I'm going to make you look really good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
And
it.
I'll ask questions from Australia.
Excellent. Okay, stop rubbing it in, guys. Like, you're going to be in Australia, and I'm going to be here.
So what are you doing for your holidays?
Apparently going to Vancouver. That's what I do.
Oh, lovely.
Anyways, onward and
Right.
upward. Let's go to
Thanks
the
for keeping us on
14.
track.
I got to keep you guys on track.
All right. Pinot Noir 2014, I believe. Not the oldest. This is an awesome wine. Probably one of my favorite wines that I know just got released to you guys, but I've been drinking it for at least a year and a half now.
You probably shouldn't rub that in, just saying.
But it's
a perk.
Quality control, just particular. Want to make sure that it's still holding up before we released it. But beautiful vintage for Pinot. We don't make a lot of Pinot Noir here, as you probably heard on the show before. And we probably in the market take a bit of slack from our northern friends who always say it's too hot to grow Pinot down here. When you try a wine like this, it's quite obvious that they're not right. I think it's a beautiful Pinot. It's not it's not on limestone, so it's not super Burgundian. In fact, it's not Burgundian at all. It's really just a beautiful, rich style of Pinot that's got some really nice elegance. Did about 30% whole cluster. It's 100% natural fermentation, all done in small open top fermenters. Spends about a year and a bit in predominantly neutral oak. I think there was maybe 8% New French in there. But this wine's been drinking great for a while now. And hopefully we get the reserve to you guys soon too, because that's also a delicious, delicious wine. Yeah, not much else to say. What do you think, Mooney?
I love it. I actually love growing Pinot down here. I'm just adding to that northerner thing. What happened was that Pinot, if everyone knows, is the heartbreak grape, right? That's what they call it. And you've seen all the movies and everything like that. What happens is that Pinot is very prone to being overcropped. And if it's overcropped, you get bad quality. It grows so well in the South Okanagan that the boys, as in the vineyard guys, were taking as much yield as they were historically. Probably over the last 10 years in the South Okanagan, they've worked it out. They've started to yield down, and now they're actually producing these really powerful Pinots that are down here, even in seasons like 2010, which I think was one of our best vintages of Pinot that we ever had. They couldn't even grow Pinot up north. So, it's very versatile down here in the South. Just by manipulating yield, we can, if it's a hot season or a cold season, we can manipulate the vines to actually make really good Pinot every year. So,
So This is actually a personal question for me, because I've heard numerous times that you love growing Pinot Noir.
Yep.
What exactly is it about Pinot Noir that you love growing so much?
It's the whole mystique about Pinot Noir. There's so many different clones. It reacts so differently to the soil type that it grows on. It's just a challenge as a grower to grow good Pinot. So that's why I like it, right? So it gives you a little bit of a challenge in the vineyard every year. It can do strange things, or it can grow really nicely, whatever. So it's very seasonal, very climatic driven, very terroir driven. So that's why I like Pinot.
From a winemaking perspective, it's similar. It's very responsive to your inputs. And you'll find quite quickly, if you don't know what you're doing, if you undercrop or overcrop too much, for us on the Black Sage where it's super dry, irrigation is crucial. But if you overwater or underwater, if you miss the sweet spot by even a little bit,
average,
you'll destroy it. You'll destroy it. And same with the cellar. You could do 100% whole cluster. That might work for some sites and in some regions. Or you can do 0% whole cluster. And again, if you go sort of one, if the pendulum swings too far in one direction versus the other, then you'll kill the wine. And so it's not easy to make a good one. So I think that's probably also why I'm quite happy with this one. I'd only made Pinot Noir once prior to this in 2010. It did win a Lieutenant Governor's Award, so it wasn't that bad either.
Wow, that's a way to humble brag. Jeez.
But to get it right 2 times in a row, I really, I'm shocked. But it's, what we do here for winemaking is pretty much super minimalistic anyways. So the kudos goes pretty much to this guy.
It's So when Andrew talks about whole bunch pressing, things like that, what happens is if I don't get the grapes not just sugar ripe, they have to be what we call phenologically ripe in the vineyard. So the actual stem that the grapes is on has got to be woody and ripe as well, because if they crush the grapes or put in the whole bunches into those whole bunch ferments, you'll actually, if the bunch stems themselves are green, you're going to pick up green flavors and things, which isn't very good. So you have to be really careful, because there is a bit of a microscope, I suppose, on Pinot Noir in a winery in the way that they treat it really nicely and things like that. So, it's very important how it comes out of the vineyard to the winery too. So,
and Pinot Noir drinkers are pretty particular people. You're not
a whole different race.
It is.
And I'm one of them.
A whole different race of wine drinker.
I have a slew of questions, actually, a whole slew of questions about Pinot Noir.
Good.
I've never talked so much on these, really, so this is kind of fun. The first question is, there was a notice that there is a lightness to the color of this Pinot. Is there a particular reason for that?
Well, lightness, I guess, I wouldn't say that's a light Pinot. Pinot Noir in general is a light colored red wine. They just, the grapes themselves don't have the tannin, and they don't have the anthocyanin, which is the actual color compound. They don't have nearly as many as, say, your Cabernets or your Merlots or, most red wine grapes. And that's kind of why working with it is kind of challenging. You could sit there and beat it up to try and get more tannin out of it, to get more color out of it, but then it'd be too tannic to drink, and you'd upset
finding a fine balance.
True. Yeah, it is. But it also depended on vintage dramatically, and pH, which we're getting a bit nerdy there.
So with that question, Carol's wondering, how much opening do these wines need? Considering the Pinot is lighter, does it need to be open for the same amount of time as, say, something like the Creek or the Old Field Reserve Merlot, or is it pretty drinkable right away?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I think our Pinot Noirs, based on the soil types in particular, they lead to higher pHs. So the acid level ends up being less intense, which theoretically makes them softer and not as age-worthy. I think, this Pinot Noir from 2014 will age 15 years without a question. But it also means that it's more approachable when it's younger. And, these Pinot Noirs, I think they're barrel aged for 12 to 14 months already, which is longer than most. Plus they're also bottle aged. This wine is 3 years old now. So very much ready to drink. When you compare where our Pinot Noirs hit the market at in terms of age at release, we're usually at least 1 year, if not 2 years older than everybody else. And that's because, we're wanting to make sure that these wines are ready to drink at release. And that goes for all of them, not just the Pinot Noirs. But you'll notice for the most part, Tin Horn's wines are generally a year or two older than everybody else's. And that's because they're designed that way. We have the ability to age them longer. Most wineries,
and we're nearly 25 years old.
25 years old.
So we're capable of doing those kind of things.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, if you wanted to, I could digress quite a long way here.
We have a lot of questions.
Okay, then I'll stop with. I'll stop with that. Thanks, Shalane.
So Elizabeth came in during harvest. She's a wine club member, and the staff actually pointed out that there was open tanks fermenting the Pinot Noir. Why do you do those?
That's traditional for Burgundy.
Okay.
And so with Pinot Noir, you need to, as I mentioned before, you could really beat them up and extract a lot of tannin to try and get more color, but that makes the wine tannic, which Pinot Noir is theoretically not. So with an open top fermenter that's small like that, what we do with all of our reds is cap management. And so we're punching down the caps, which is where all the skins tend to form. And so it's a much more delicate process than using a pump to turn over the tanks and macerate the skins. So they're in small containers so that you can physically do that. Generally anything more, our open tops are about 1.5 metric tons. For the most part, a man can't physically punch down a cap that's going to be more than 4 or 5 metric tons. So they're small by design so that you can use that technique. Plus the open tops also tend to evaporate more alcohol because it's not a closed container. So your alcohols tend to be lower, which is also a desirable trait for Pinot Noir. But all of that is based on a traditional process for the grape variety, which is, at this point, somewhere around 700 or 800 years old in Central Eastern France. So we're not doing anything new here.
Inventing wheels.
Yeah, just continuing on with a successful process of a few generations.
So, one more question about Pinot Noir. See, people have tons of questions about Pinot Noir. Good. I just want to note as well that if we go a little bit over the hour tonight, that's kind of expected because we haven't had one since July.
Yep.
So if you have more questions, we're more than happy.
I'm on double time as of 3 hours ago.
Whatever, so. You're on salary. And plus, you've been dealing with me, so it's great. So what is it about Pinot Noir that often leaves the dusty sensation on the back of the throat?
That would be tannin.
Okay.
That's the grapes expressing themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's dusty is kind of a nice way to put from what I perceive as sounds like a fine tannin, a tannin that's there, that's present, that gives the wine structure and the ability to age, but also isn't bitter and it's not causing your mouth to kind of dry out. So it's almost exactly where we're trying to get our tannin profiles on our Pinot Noir. So that comes from the grape skins, a little bit from the grape seeds, and also from the stalks, because we do use some whole cluster. And that's what Andrew was referring to. We're trying to make sure that all three of those components of the grape bunch are ripe. And that's not easy to do every year. In years like 15 that were quite hot, it was really hard to get all those three components in line. But in years like 14, 16, and 17, no problem. So
I have another question. So of the two Andrews, who has more power to say this is ready or this is not ready?
This guy.
That's what I thought.
We usually arm wrestle.
I'm usually like a normal farmer, and I'm going, get my grapes off, get my grapes off, get my grapes off, because I want to go on holidays. But I suppose that question comes back to originally, a lot of people ask what the difference was between a vineyard manager and a viticulturist, right? What happened over the years was I started off as a vineyard manager, and then through training and experience, you become a viticulturist. The reason being that you become more symbiotic with your customer, being the winery. So you start off as a pure farmer wanting to get as much yield as you can and make as much money for the farm, didn't care so much what happened after that. Yeah. At this point in time in my life, I care so much about what happens in the end product and
the business in whole. Right?
It's a symbiotic thing. So this sounds strange. Some people have asked me, I can actually taste wines where I know where the viticulturist and the vineyard manager haven't seen eye to eye. Okay, so they're not symbiotic. They don't pick at the right time. And the wine becomes disjointed, underripe or overripe or things like that. So when you get the two together, that's when wine becomes what it is, magical and it's art and science put together.
Basically you're saying that our wines are so good because of your bromance?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anyone that works in a business knows that it's not who's got the power, who makes the right decision. Every time we make picks, it's a discussion that we have. And there's a lot more factors involved more often than not than
that people don't see. Yeah.
Yes, the grapes have to be as perfectly ripe as we can get them. Some seasons they don't get there. Some seasons they get there earlier than others. And some seasons the truck breaks down and you can't go get those grapes the day you want them. And some days he's looking at his radar and I'm looking at mine. He's like, we could have frost next week. What do you think we should do? And that's how it works. It's, him and I definitely have a pretty rockin' bromance during harvest, but if we didn't, we wouldn't be making these wines as good as they are.
It's not as common as you think.
Okay? I don't think it is. So just even personally, having gone to other wineries and seeing other relationships and hearing other people in both of your positions talk about one another.
I've been fortunate since I came to Tinhorn. I had the same relationship with Sandra. And my biggest fear when Sandra left was I wouldn't have that same relationship with that guy, Andrew. And so what happened was when he showed up and he showed me, he's very interested in vineyards, that's rare in a lot of winemakers as well. So that was appeased fairly quickly that, everything was all still really good. And so that's, people don't understand how good that relationship can be or how bad it can be. So, it's very important in wine, I think, that,
I think now that I'm just thinking back at things, we have more challenges in the spring or in the winter when we're trying to plan the wines. Yeah. And that's not just Andrew and I, that's, that was the board of managers before and everyone
sales,
involved.
Marketing,
Sales,
everything's involved, right?
So that's usually where there's more conflict than him and I. Once the wine sort of program is set in place, him and I know more or less how to do it as best as it can be done. It's the plan is actually the bigger challenge, and we'll be getting into that soon.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm glad I'm not on that side of the building. So next up, let's move on to the Cab Franc 15. This is actually a personal favorite of mine. I really like this one. But I do have a question from Ron because he's noticing in our cellaring notes, because I put cellaring notes underneath the tasting, is that there's like a 7 to 10, 3 to 5. Why the variance? Is there a specific time frame, or is it just good to drink before these recommendations?
Which one?
He was talking predominantly about the Pinot Noir, but you can see that on the Cab Franc, the Oldfield Reserve Merlot, and the Creek. There's a variance on that.
I think
it's vintage dependent.
It is vintage dependent, but I also think historically we'd been very conservative on our cellaring potentials for these wines. I certainly when I look back at the tech sheets prior to me starting, there weren't many that were, you know, in the 5+ year range. And it's just not true.
That's coming from a young industry too.
Absolutely.
We don't have, in Okanagan itself, we don't have the history of, say, Burgundy, of what wines are capable of in their long-term cellaring. So, you know, just examples are, if anyone out there has Old Gree, right,
or Goo,
even, you can go back 10 years, 12, 15 years from now back, and Gree is like, it can be spectacular. There's nowhere anywhere in Okanagan that someone said cellar this for 15 years, right? Because you don't buy Gree to cellar it. But it's so rewarding to actually drink those wines at that time on certain vintages. So it's the history of this valley.
I think there's also the fact that we did, I think it was December of last year, massive cellar tasting and library tasting of pretty much everything up into 2005, I want to say. Could have been 2008.
I think it was 2005.
2005. So we had tasted pretty much everything that we'd made prior to that. And the only thing that kept, so this goes back to 94. And so the only thing that kept any of these wines from a proper life that was still drinkable was the capsule, or the cork, to be specific. And it's not surprising that we switched to be 100% Stelvin in 2005, 2006. And you know, you taste anything from us that goes back to 05, 06 now, those wines are easily going to age another 10 years. So my first point was that when I was writing the tasting notes for the 15 reds and the 16 whites, was that I had done that tasting, and you may see a boost in the life expectancy of those wines on those text sheets from 5 to 10 to 10 to 20.
Yeah, because legit on the text sheet that they would have gotten in their tasting notes, and the selling potential here is 20 years on the 15, which is unheard of. I remember the first time that I heard you talk about the Gewürztraminer and saying that it could last for 10 years. And it was kind of mind-blowing, because predominantly we usually drink our whites really young. We don't cellar them. So interesting.
No, and it's, again, you know, these are directives for, you know, whether or not, if you were poured that wine at a table by a somm and you thought it was too old, and he reserved the right to say there's nothing wrong with that wine, those wines would be easily, you know, 20 keep together. Those wines would easily go that long. And you know, you drink Bordeaux wines, which is what most of what we make here is Bordeaux reds. 20 years for them is still young. So don't be shocked by a 20-year-old life.
So sorry, I'm not going to name names, and pardon my French, but one of the comments that just came through is, "You expect me to wait 15 years to drink this?" NFW, which would stand for no fucking way. So well done. I'm glad that our club members love our wine so much that they have a hard time cellaring it.
The only way that you can cellar a wine for 15 years is if you buy 15 cases of it and you only drink one a year.
Or your wife's arachnophobic and you just tell her there's so many spiders in the cellar that she doesn't go down there. Like, that works too.
Redbacks too. Oh no, we call them black widows here.
Tell Lindsay that's what you're doing.
That's exactly what I do.
It's down by the black widow.
And the spiders are like this big.
So the Cab Franc, I already drank and spat mine out. We haven't even talked about it yet. 2015, we haven't done a 15 yet, Mr. Moon. Tell us about the 15 vintage.
15 was a little cooler. 14 was really warm. 15 was a little cooler. So it was actually moving a little bit back towards average. It was still a little warmer than average. But Cabernet Franc, one of my favorite, it is my favorite grape varietal to grow here in Okanagan.
Throwing it down tonight, ladies.
Absolutely.
Whoa.
So
variety to grow.
If all you guys out there want to know what the best grape varietal is to grow in BC, I'll tell you it's
Cabernet Sauvignon.
Cabernet Franc. Anyway, just saying. Cab Franc, it's a strange beast. I think the sexiness of Cab Sauv wiped it off the planet Earth many years ago. There's only a couple of viticultural areas in the world that Cab Franc does really well. The Okanagan being number one, I say. And that's from drinking it in Loire and Bordeaux if you can get it by itself. Yeah. It's used as a blender there quite often. Ontario do a few good examples of it, and down into Washington State. So,
yeah, you do see more in Washington.
Very good variety to grow here, very expressive. It's more feminine than Cab Sauv, so if you're not after that big, powerful, Cab Sauv expression, Cab Franc's the wine to go to. It's just such an easy, great variety to grow here, I find. It's just our vines are pushing over 20-odd years over on the Black Sage. There's, as in winterization, if you want to call it that, they're the most survivable. They've survived the best out of all the vines over on the Black Sage.
Yeah. Important in Canada where...
Absolutely. So very sustainable, great variety. And then it produces these beautiful wines. And then, I think this vintage, this is one golds, double golds, or gold, things like that.
Doing right. Still very, very young.
14 Oldfield Series won a lot of awards. Yep. But yeah, beautiful wine. I love it. So I agree with Shalane. It's a very good one.
I think that here's the thing is whenever I'm behind the bar, and I don't get to be behind the bar as often as I would like anymore. Well, maybe. But we do Cab Franc. We have a love affair with Cab Franc here. We have our varietal, yep. We have our Oldfield Series Cabernet Franc, and then we have obviously our rosé that we blink and it's sold out. And I just think that we do it really, really well. And I think it's beautiful. It gives me chills when I speak about our Cab Franc. So thank you.
Yes. Well, the 15, I know it was cooler, I believe, in growing degree days than 14 or 16, but it was hotter than hell in August and September.
Yep.
And I remember, you and I early, it might not have even been August, it may have been July, late June. The heat units were clicking over and it was a hot summer. And we're like, should we get some more leaf coverage on the Cab Franc this year to try and protect it from sunburn? And we decided that was a good idea. So we did a bit more shaded fruit, which I think you can see in the wine quite substantially. So we were talking about, decisions that we make in the vineyard that affect Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, and sunlight is another very, very important correlation. The pepperiness that you see in this wine, not necessarily black pepper, but more bell pepper or capsicum, depending on where you're from. That's all derived from pyrazines, and they're common in all of the Sauvignon varieties, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Cabernet Franc. But they're photosensitive. So anytime that we make the decision to leave leaves on, we're risking having elevated levels of pyrazines in there. But you also get a lot more rich, ripe fruit. So this is all of the 15s that will be coming out are this rich and lush and easy to drink out of the gate. It's a very seductive vintage, to say the least. And I think everyone's going to like it. The Merlot is dynamite. I've been tasting the reserve wines already, and they're off the charts awesome. So I think, for the most part, everyone is going to really, really like the 15 vintage for these big reds. The whites have, for the most part, come out and are more or less sold through, and they were also quite rich and ripe. But the 15 vintages will go down as some pretty powerful, soft, fruit-driven styles. Wouldn't necessarily they're going to be typical, but they're nice to have. They're probably once in a decade kind of vintage.
Do those tend to, because we're talking about how 2015 is more fruit driven, do those tend to cellar better then, or is it a wine that's dry or more tannic, quote unquote, that'll cellar better?
Well, I think because the sunlight was still super intense, the tannin profiles on the 15s are really high as well. So They're pretty much, if you take this, your typical Bordeaux red from the Okanagan and then just amp it up probably 30 to 40% in tannin and fruit power. That's the 15 in a nutshell across all varieties. It's an impressive vintage. It might, the nice thing about it is it looks good now, but it will age without a doubt for a very, very long time. And it's got enough fruit to go the distance. Absolutely.
Spiders. Need more spiders.
Totally.
Lots and lots of
Yeah,
spiders.
15 is a great vintage. I mean, it might be a little bit young and tannic for some, but if you like a strong wine, 15 is going to be your vintage for sure.
If you want to geek
Stock
out a little bit, Cab Franc's the mum,
Yeah.
Sauvignon Blanc's the dad, and then you get Cab Sauv.
So obviously Cab Franc is better.
Well, if you got mummy issues or something, it's like
We're not.
it's the thing, right? She's the mum. Right?
We have mommy issues. Oh my God, I love it. All right, we should move on to the 2014 Oldfield Reserve Merlot. But just, I know we have a lot of wines to go through, but just we can talk about the wine as we do this poll. But I did make up a little poll, and I wanted to see what everybody's favorite wine from the fall release was.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all the wines that we're trying tonight. And why don't we go ahead and do that? I need to learn how to do that because this is new. All right. There we go. So you guys can pick between the 2016 Chardonnay, the 2-inch white, the 14 Pinot, the 15 Cab Franc, the 14 Oldfield Reserve Merlot, or the Creek.
Oh, the 14 Reserve Merlot or the Creek.
Yeah, we should probably spend some extra time on the Creek since it's our new flagship wine.
Good point.
Yeah, because right now it's between the Pinot Noir and the Cab
Are you talking
Franc.
about drinking on November 20? What are we at?
21st?
First?
It's the 21st all day today.
It was. That's true.
Yeah, so
It's a tough
far
one.
right now we're sitting at like 50-50.
I'm going to
between the
defer.
Pinot
Can I
and the
defer to
Cab Franc.
him?
Sure. Well, they're all talking about everything,
I
so
know.
why don't we talk about the 14 Merlot a little bit?
Well, I'm certain he's tried all of these, so I think you could probably call your favorite at this point now. What would it be, Mr. Man?
Drinkability now, like I said, so I like whites and reds. So that's I'm actually
Surprising
He
to
sees
hear
no
that.
color.
Yeah.
yeah.
Not rosé though.
Yeah. I'm going to do the Chardonnay.
Mhm.
If I'm having dinner with someone and I'm doing whites, 2-inch white, this is what happens. I don't have favorites.
Yeah, he's doing a very good job at picking
Pinot,
1, 2, 3, or 4, 5.
Pinot Noir, lit the fire the other night, just sat down,
Yeah.
had a Pinot just
Yeah.
before dinner. It was lovely.
All right. Well, apparently our viewers
what are the
tonight
viewers like?
are very diplomatic as well because it's literally a 50-50 split between the Pinot Noir and the Cab Franc. So
Interesting.
good taste,
Yeah.
right? So
Excellent.
I would say out of the two, probably the 14 Pinot was probably your favorite.
Yeah,
I think
easily
tonight,
for
and
me. Yeah.
yours was the
We
15
talked it
Cab
up
Franc.
too much. I think we talked those
I
two
think so.
ones.
I think
Oh,
they're
it's possible.
skewed on
It's
all of
possible.
I
it.
think we've skewed
Or
them.
they've been really smart and they've laid down their creek for a little bit as well.
As you should.
Yeah.
As you should. Well, mind you, all three of these Bordeaux Reds, they're I don't want to say they're young, but they're borderline young, Whereas the Pinot Noir, it's drinking supremely well right now.
Yeah, I've gotten a number of comments saying, I want 2 votes. I haven't enjoyed my
I'd probably
cake yet.
I'd probably
Which is
still
smart.
wait till Christmas for my 16 shards. I'm
Yeah.
smart enough to have a lot of 14 and 15 Chardonnays left still, so I'm still working through
Wow.
those.
Hey, I still have a 15 rosé right now. That I'm
I got some 14 roses.
wow,
really
okay,
nice.
one up me.
Yeah.
Fine, I see how this is.
Yeah, and I got some
get it.
17 roses from the tank.
You guys can't, never mind.
Okay, so
So the Oldfield Reserve Merlot. So traditionally, this has actually been my favorite red that we do. I think it's our most elegant red.
until I started making it.
This is
Well,
a
really,
powerful
kinda
wine.
Yeah, it is. And here's the thing, like I always kind of describe the varietal Merlot as like your take it home, drink it right away, great barbecue wine. I use it as my house wine if it's not the Cab Franc. And then the Oldfield Reserve Merlot is like my special occasion. I don't open that for anybody. Like if it's somebody who doesn't really appreciate fine wine, I'm probably not going to open that wine for them. If it's like our second bottle in or something.
Just saying, this is one of the wines I would put in the cellars, put spiders around, everything like that. This is
tannins are coming through.
Tannins, massive tannins, beautiful structure. This comes off our old vineyard blocks over on the Black Sage. Merlot's been always the workhorse. It's probably
100% GHI.
Yeah, backbone of Tinhorn. Merlot's beautiful. It's one of the most successful grape varieties in Okanagan, and it should be. They make great Merlots here. From where I'm from, I never used to drink Merlot. It was wishy-washy and some kind of bizarre Beaujolais kind of style. But when I came here, Merlot was one of the things.
Wishy-washy.
Yes. No, hopefully no more Aussies are watching tonight because I've just ditched their Merlot program in Australia. But no, beautiful wines.
GHI, what is that?
It's one of our blocks in the Diamondback Vineyard.
Very creative with our vineyard names.
Okay.
They're alphabetized A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I.
And then 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just, they don't think the vineyard.
If you've ever played Battleship, you can find our Merlot GHI block.
Yeah. And we haven't got more than 5 fingers, so we only go up to number 4 in the vineyard. That's
the interesting thing about that block, and I won't go too far into it because I'm sure we don't have that much time. It is, as you're running from the valley floor to the east towards the Black Hills, it is the highest elevation spot in our Diamondback Vineyard, which has a lot of benefits, but also has a lot of risks. Yes.
Do we always do our Oldfield Reserve Merlot from those blocks, or is it vary from?
Unfortunately, after the winter of 2014, we lost a good chunk of that.
We lost our DEF blocks,
and a bit of GHI.
But what happens is, so this is some of that discussion we had before. We work through vineyards through the year, and you just see how the season's going, and then you can basically pretty early in the season, just through experience, you're walking through a block and you're just thinking to yourself, this is turning out pretty good. So you kind of tag in those blocks in the back of your mind that they could become a reserve wine or whatever. But that can change. It could change in tank. It could change in barrel. It can do all that. But you do get those feelings in the vineyard when you do taste fruit that they could. And we've got a number of Merlot blocks over there. So some years they flip backwards and forwards depending on the season, what the climate's been doing. So the answer to the question is no, they don't always come out of the same block. It's, in fact, no, it's very seasonal of how the reserve wines come out. So
do you know, going back into the days where Sandra was making the wines, where they were picked
I've picked, I know back in 09, 10 and stuff, there was some GHI was in there. We've also had our ABC blocks near our farm shop that used to produce stuff.
Opposite end.
And then the DEFs have produced stuff. And then we've got blocks right next to Burring Owl down the bottom, and they've occasionally popped up as Merlot blocks too. So it just depends on the season.
It's interesting because it is a very homogeneous vineyard for the most part.
It's just subtle changes in the slope.
But it's not like we've got sand in one spot and gravel in the other and clay over there. It's a pretty homogeneous terroir.
It's just subtle changes.
Aspect is different.
Subtle changes in aspect and slope in the vineyard, and that I think that makes a big difference for Merlot.
So here's a good one. So one of our club members, they had the innovation series at Miradoro this summer. So what is the innovation series, and what was kind of the thought behind that? We're totally going over the hour.
Okay. Innovation series. Okay, I don't want to draw this out too long, but every winemaker wants to have the opportunity to try and learn new things. Even if you're born into the business, you're looking at maybe 30, 35 chances to make wines. Yes, you'll get to make multiple wines during every harvest, but you're only going to survive 35, 40 harvests. And at this point, I'm getting close to getting halfway there. Innovation Series is, an opportunity that I kind of was lucky enough to carve out, I guess, some unique wines that were never going to be mainstream. So I'm not sure if our chat guests tried the orange wine or the white Pinot Noir.
I actually did have a question with the white Pinot earlier because there was a question of would we make it again?
Depends on whether or not I run out of innovation. The Innovation Series is 150 cases maximum generally of a wine. And so, we make a good number of SKUs at Tinhorn, 16, 17 changes every year. But, to make a few small lot productions of a natural wine, a white Pinot Noir, whatever it might be, we're looking to make things just outside of the everyday table wine genre. And if you travel the wine world, or if you're a pretty big wine geek and head to your local wine bar, if you live in an actual city, fortunate enough to do that, then you'll find that there's, in 8,000 years of winemaking, everything's been done at some point. So it's not really innovative, but what you can do with grapes is pretty impressive in terms of a range of wine styles. And so the Innovation Series was more or less looking to take opportunity to make something that had never been done before. And in 2014, that was a Golden Mile Bench Kerner orange wine.
Chelan chimes in.
So, I mean, it's a lot of fun. It keeps my staff pretty clued in, and they're always very excited to, even if it's sitting down in the middle of harvest and carving out a 16-hour day doing something that seems ridiculous, they're all for it if they, think it'll turn out to be an interesting wine that they've never not only tried before, but never even thought of conceptually. So that's sort of what we try to achieve with that. And it also, I got to give kudos to Manny at Miradoro. He was always a big supporter of the program. When I started making these wines, before I'd even told the directors at Tinhorn, I was showing them to him. And, he told me that he'd be able to sell X number of cases, no problem. And so I knew that there would be a market for it. And that was kind of the birth of it. I guess, historically, Sandra was also, she's a winemaker too. And she was, looking at trying to make innovative wines. And
Rosé was one of them.
2008, that was Rosé.
Yeah,
so,
we wouldn't have the Rosé without Sandra.
So, winemakers are creative, artistic people as well as science nerds. And you look for an opportunity to express yourself. Innovation Series is that opportunity for all of us here at Tinhorn, and it's not a cellar thing. We do innovation in the vineyard too, and just looking to make interesting wine so that when you guys come here, you have an opportunity to try something that's unique and makes us a destination as well as a go-to for quality wines every day.
I think that leads us right into the fact that we're 25 years old, almost, and we just released our flagship wine this year.
Mm-hmm.
Great segue into the creek.
Right? I thought so. I went there. I was just like, let's go.
This is a bit not an innovation wine. This is here to stay, as long as our Cab Sauv does well.
All right. Well, we got to spend at least 45 minutes on the creek. So tell everybody to settle in. If they haven't opened one yet, time to open one.
We can do a dance interlude. We're going to get another wine.
Get some popcorn. And open up a creek. I don't know, Mr. Boone, you want to start with the creek?
Yeah, so the creek came about. It's kind of like in the Innovation Series, but what was happening was these walks that we were doing through the vineyards through a number of years. Because the vineyards were getting older, we actually start to learn a little bit. Imagine that, we're walking through vineyards after, say, 10, 20 years, whatever. And at Tinhorn, doing a little bit different. You see a lot of flagship or icon wines come out of guys that know their vineyards for 1 year. I'd never understood that concept. But what happens is you start to learn your vines. You start to go, hey, when we're talking about when we put grapes into the reserve series, you're starting to think to yourself, these grapes are better than that. So you start thinking, okay, and it's not that you're dejected as a vineyard guy. You know your grapes are really good, and then they could go into a wine label that mightn't justify the hard work. Justify those grapes. Yeah. So after a number of years, this is a bit of inception that was going on before 2014. Then we all sat round and we decided that we had some of the best Cabernet Sauvignon that's grown in the Okanagan. We've definitely got some of the best Merlot. We know we've got some of the best Cab Franc. We've been very successful with the Malbec and the Petit Verdot. So we had all these grapes, and they were going into some wines. Anyway, we decided to go with the Icon wine. It showcases what Tinhorn can do in the vineyard and in winemaking. Very proud to have this wine go out to the customers. It really shows. The biggest thing with this wine to me is that it's Cabernet Sauvignon dominated. It's very rare in the valley. Most of the Bordeaux blends or Meritage, whatever you want to call them,
flagship wines for that matter,
which are usually Bordeaux blends, they're mainly Merlot dominant. So this is a little bit different. There's a couple on the market as well that are Cab Sauv, but the biggest thing about this is if our Cab Sauv doesn't perform, the creek doesn't exist. Very proud to show you guys this wine. That's my spiel on the creek.
Yeah, I think.
So in saying that, though, just a quick question. So let's say we have a vintage, like let's say just the 2017. So let's say this year's harvest, we didn't get in enough Cab Sauv to make the creek. We won't make a creek, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It's not about the quantity that we get in. It's more about the quality. And if we back up to the inception of the wine, Cabernet Sauvignon is not an easy grape variety to grow in the Okanagan in general. We happen to have some very, very good sites. And anyone that's heard the creek spiel before knows it takes a damn good grape grower to make Cab Sauv not only drinkable, but to be the flagship component. The major component of your flagship variety is a serious testament to the viticultural skills that Andrew Moon has. For me, this is my first vintage at Tinhorn Creek, was 2014. The Cabernet Sauvignon for me was by far the best grape variety that vintage. And like I said, Andrew was talking up the Cab Franc being, the variety that everyone loves, and you as well, Chelan. But for me, it's Cab Sauv. And if you guys haven't had the opportunity to try any Cab Sauv from 15, 16, or 17, but I have, and please trust me when I tell you, it is the best variety that we have. And these are very, very different vintages. 14, 15, 16, and 17 are all quite different. But I find our Cabernet Sauvignon is such a beautiful, pure expression of the variety, the brightness, the freshness, the power, and the tannins are always, to me, they're all spot on. And to make that the driving force behind our creek was a no-brainer for me. And I think you guys will see as we progress into the next few vintages, that it is a really unsung hero for the Okanagan. Everyone is so concerned that it's too cold here to grow it the way they do in Napa, or to grow it as you would in the Barossa Valley. Yeah. But that's not the only expression, and maybe Bordeaux, but actually we're probably closer to Bordeaux than the other two regions I just mentioned. So what is true Cabernet Sauvignon in terms of a Bordeaux blend? I think we're very, very close to making one of the best expressions of that variety that exists anywhere. So
I've had a question come through going Hungarian oak because is there a specific reason why you're moving into Hungarian oak? Or
yeah, it's really good. That's the simple answer.
Fair enough. Okay.
The complex answer is if you go to these forests, which I've been fortunate enough to do, the most expensive forests in France, and those that are the most expensive in Hungary. If you know a little bit about history, Hungary was a communist country for a number of years. And as a consequence, economically, they're a little bit more depressed than the Western European countries. But when it comes to terroir, which is as important for oak barrel trees as it is grapevines, you won't find better oak growing forests in Hungary than anywhere than Hungary. It's quite amazing how beautiful the forests are there. They have the exact same forest growth systems that they have in France that are have more or less been set by royalty from
same species
5 centuries ago. Yeah, and oak and European oak, let's say French and Hungarian oak in particular, it's always going to be, for the most part, a blend of 2 species of oak. And it's more about which one is more Petrea or sessile oak, which is the straighter tree. And the 2 most renowned forests in the world are
this is nerding out now.
Yeah, this is too nerding out.
Tronçais and Zempelin Forest outside of Tokai. And
I feel like
I'll cut it
more
off there.
about trees than I've ever known.
So that probably didn't answer your question on why Hungarian oak, but just trust me, it's very good. It's very, very good, and it's for the most part now, almost every barrel supplier and barrel producer in Hungary, they're owned by French companies. So all the technology and techniques that the French were using are now in place in Hungary.
So I have one last question, and it's a personal question from me. Because why not?
Yeah.
So you've been here for 2014, 15, 16, and 17, and you've been for, out of those vintages, what's been your favorite vintage and what's been your most difficult vintage?
That's easy.
Favorite vintage? The first one was probably my favorite.
Well, that was like a unicorn. We kind of all made fun of you going, it was kind of a great year for you to come in. Like all the variables were there.
But it's always fun coming to a new place and working with a new team. And working with new sites. The nice thing about the preceding vintages is that they're all quite dramatically different. And I'm glad they weren't my first vintages because they required a lot more technical skill in terms of winemaking. That's you make wine in Canada, you have to know what you're doing. And you need to be prepared for pretty much anything. As Andrew Moon would attest to in the vineyard, no 2 vintages are the same. And if they are the same, they're about 15 years apart and you've forgotten what happened the first time. You never forget.
You never forget.
You never forget. Let's not forget.
I never forget.
The 14 is your favorite?
I think so, but I also really like 17.
Oh my God. Decision.
Well, 17 was a lot more fun because in the first week of October when we had a full moon, Andrew Moon and myself were wondering if this is going to be potentially the worst vintage of all time or potentially one of the best. And we got through that first week of October without having a frost and losing all of our leaves. And as a consequence, all of our red wines now look to be potentially the best of the 4 vintages. So, we won't know until, I generally don't judge wines until they're done mallow in the spring. But I'm really excited about 17.
That's awesome. And what would be your favorite vintage out of all those? Our people want to know.
Just the ones he's been here or the ones right now?
Well, let's go with, we have the perspective of Andrew being here. So out of the 14 to 17, what would be your favorite?
Probably 14.
Probably not the frost.
14 was probably... I just come out of the coldest, the 10 and 11 were the coldest vintages in Canadian history. 13's like a bounce back year in the vineyard, so I'm not usually happy about bounce back years because it's a hard battle with the vines and things like that because they've under-yielded and vigor and stuff. So 14 and being warm, it was kind of back to normal. It produced some really powerful reds. Great grapes, whatever. I like that. 17 to me is a difficult viticultural year.
Yeah, that's true.
But if you say that, it's challenging and it gets you.
Does that kind of make that more fun though? It's kind of like the adrenaline rush.
Yeah,
No.
to get the grapes off.
He needs another year to get over it, I think.
Yeah, to get the grapes off and in
There's
good
more
quality, that's the biggest challenge. So
That's true. It was,
so
super
that
hard.
if you're looking at it that perspective, 17 is a great year for that.
Yeah.
Whereas 15, 16 was just, to me, the normal grape growing seasons. Right?
Yeah.
So 14, because it was a bit warmer coming out of the cold, and then 17, it had some difficulties in viticulture wise, but you have to address those in season. So I'm very happy with the wines that came out.
He's got a hard job.
You could have had nothing in 17.
Very true.
But
Very true.
yeah, and that's how it is. That's farming.
Yeah.
Right? So
That's true. So we're like 10 minutes over, so we should probably wrap it up. So I'm going to come around again and give a little hey, I'm going to try to select some wine, guys.
Okay.
you can do that.
I know.
And
I'm
the
really good
date
at that.
and the date is set for the next webinar.
Yeah, okay.
You might want to let them know.
Oh, God, I got to stick it
I want to let them know.
in. All right. So thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you
joining
guys
us
for tuning in.
for our first ever Crush Club chat. Obviously, we wouldn't be here without the legacy that Sandra started with the online kitchen chats. So the next one is actually going to be you and me doing a webinar on.
They're doing gymnastics.
I don't even do a somersault. Like, come on, I'm fluffy.
okay.
I don't do somersaults. So we're going to do it on library wines and cellaring. So we're going to have a potential library sale beginning of February. But most importantly, right now, there's a free ship offer that's going to be starting at midnight on Thursday. So 12:01 a.m. on Friday, the 24th. So free shipping on a case of more. And it's not on select wines this year. It's on everything that we have in stock. And if you're a 46 Bricks member, we haven't forgotten you because we think you're pretty skookum as well. If you order 6 bottles or more, you'll get an entry to win a guest house stay. So this one, I'm looking at you, Carol. I'm looking at you, Sue, Stuart, Bobby, all of you guys who are joining us all the time on these. It's a great way to come and stay and say hello and check us out. So thank you. Thank you, Andrew and Andrew,
Thanks
for
for that.
tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thanks,
So-
guys.
All right. So no swearing or talking poorly until I go and hit the thing. So bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. We got some wines to try here.
Yeah, we got a more quality control. Have a good night, y'all.